Marie-Louise Christophe from Carib Queens by Charles E. Waterman. Chapter 1. The Hôtel de la Couronne. Marie-Louise was born in Cap François in the day of its glory. Her father was a publican, and his inn flourished under the high-sounding name of Hôtel de la Couronne. It was a noted hostelry in the town and was patronized by the best people of the city and the country round about. And its courtyard were dwarf palms, mango, and other semi-shrubs, and from seats beneath them one could look at mountains looming up in the east. Because of patronage, the Hôtel de la Couronne was a public place without reservation. Also a publication place. Everything that could be called news was rehearsed within its wine room, and comments of all kinds made by those who listened. Not only was there news of the Plaine du Nord, but also from La Belle France. The French planters liked this possession of the homeland. Their life here was one of ease, and while their leisured rich flowered in, but their wives did not share their liking. A white woman aged twice as quickly in Saint-Domingue as in the home country. Their husbands, they said, love beauty and youth, so turn away from them when both have fled. Judging from the stories told in wine rooms, this must have been so, for their polygamous souls extolled the beauties of Negro mistresses who somehow did not seem to grow old. Saint-Domingue presented a curious mixture of population at this time. Not only were there 100 black slaves to every white person, but there was a vast number of persons of mixed blood. The display of street parades was varied and remarkable, and perhaps might be called magnificent. The carefully housed French women, palely white, their white husband bronzed by the Caribbean sun, their offspring by black wives, yellow in all shades, and natives ebon black. Such a parade suggested all kinds of stories and formed a singular historic background. Because of this mixed blood, there were many grades of society. White blood in any degree conferred freedom on the fortunate possessor, and yet it did not bring happiness. The half-breed aped the white man and wanted to be white, but that class did not want him to be. The law guaranteed equality, but it was a fiction. There was a line of demarcation between the two. It was possible in Saint-Domingue for a black man to be free. Free and easy masters permitted such a thing, either as a gift or by purchase if the would-be purchaser had the money. Because of this, Coidovic, the owner of the Hôtel de la Couronne, was a free man. Chapter 2. Marie-Louise. Coidovic lived a life outside his hostelry. He had a wife and daughter, both of whom he loved. The wife, like himself, had been born a slave, but the daughter had been born free. Coidovic had picked up quite a little education, and because of his surroundings, a varied one. It was irregular, however, and unsatisfactory to him. He wanted his daughter to have one obtained in the regular way, so she was sent to school. He wanted her to have accomplishments, music and painting, such as white women possessed. So he employed teachers in these arts. Marie-Louise was of a sunny disposition. She inherited this from her father, perhaps for he was of easy feeling. He knew the hard knock of life and how hard it was to climb. He was considered successful, but it had not soured him. He was a fatalist. He could account for his success in no other way. Other people had tried harder and failed, so he was ready to hold out a helping hand and to those who tried to rise. But the mother would have liked to see her daughter put on the dignity her position warranted. Marie-Louise was sunny. As a child, she played with all the children who came her way, black or white with the shades between, played in the palm shades trees in the Place d'Armes of Cap François, and with the naked black urchins and the clay-baked alleys or compounds. Station made little difference to her. As she grew older and more domestic, she was quiet. She listened to stories told by old femmes of all colors in the street of Cap François, and to those of the French women who tarried in the waiting salon of the Couronne. Strange stories they told. There was the old woman slave who scrubbed the floor of the hotel. She had been born in Africa, and the wild life she recited and yet longed for awakened a kind of awe in Marie-Louise. Her unknown ancestors must have shared that kind of life only 3 generations before her. Then Adele, the free woman, who brought stories of duplicity and fraud from the plantation of the Plaine du Nord, along with her vegetables and fruit. Then the French women of the waiting salon. They were so unhappy they did not care who heard their story. It was possible for a white man to love a Negro, but a white woman could not love even a Negro cent. Then she heard afar off France that these white women were always longing for, and of the richness there with which even the French furnished houses of Saint-Domingue could not vie. Marie-Louise gained an education not to be had in the public schools and had a historical knowledge not to be found in textbooks. Her mother denounced this knowledge as out of the regular course, but her father sympathized with it. It was so like his own. He had not thought of it as valuable in his own case. But when he heard it from his daughter's lips, his daughter who was educated, it aroused a new interest and value. "You are a wonder," he told Marie-Louise. "You should be a queen. You know so much about the people and have such an interest in them." Goidovic could not convince of any possibility that could make her a queen. When he made a declaration before his wife, she flung up her head. "She's too common and undignified," she said. "Nothing of that sort could happen to her." Nevertheless, Marie-Louise grew up into the same sunny-faced woman she had been as a child. She was loved by all the people of Cap François and the plantation outside. Chapter 3. The Boy from St. Kitts. One day, during Marie-Louise's girlhood, there came a new possession into the Cordovic household. A boy slave about 12 years old. He had been bought from a French naval officer in the fleet of Monsieur le Comte d'Estaing, which had put into the harbor of Cap François. This boy had been born on the island of St. Kitts. He had endured the same life as all slaves, 6 years of naked freedom and then work. At 7, he had been apprenticed to a mason kept on his master's estate. 5 years he worked at this, and after effort shown, he learned the trade well. It was hard work. However, at the age of 12, he ran away. And to be more exact, he changed masters from the French sailing master who received him on board his ship, claiming him as a slave. He had never had a name until on board this ship, when the sailors dubbed him Christophe because of the island he came from, and the name followed him through life. The ship on which he took passage put into the harbor of Cap François. As she entered the harbor, it was discovered to be in the midst of a French naval fleet of 24 ships under the command of Monsieur le Comte d'Estaing. This fleet was bound for Savannah on the American mainland to aid the Americans who were fighting to free themselves from their British overlords. The admiral had been recruiting 1,500 soldiers with which to assist the American colonies, with 2,200 more from Guadeloupe and Martinique. The fleet reached its destination, stayed a month during a rainy season, and then returned to the island homes of the soldiers. The young officer had no further use for a servant, so he sold Christophe to Cordovic. Christophe was of rather a surly disposition, but no one could withstand Marie-Louise's sunny smile, so they became close childhood friends and sweetheart as the years passed. He had a fund of new tales for her to listen to and meditate on. Most of her old stories had to do with the island she lived on in France, the country the white planters came from. Now she learned there was a land to the west of Saint-Domingue, a great nation, and they were fighting for independence from England. She listened to this description of the soldiers he marched with, the Negro troops from the West Indies, the regular from France, and the hard-featured farmers from the American colonies. But mostly, she liked to listen to the stories of a Saint-Domingue mulatto, Chavan, who had become Christophe's chum. Chavan had been greatly impressed with what the Americans were fighting for: freedom. Why would not freedom be had in Saint-Domingue? This greatly impressed Marie-Louise. She was free, but why could not Christophe, her best friend, also be free? Christophe was a stable boy about the hotel, and the light-hearted, half-drunk planters tossed him many a gold piece as a tip when he brought their horses to the block. That put an idea into the head of Marie-Louise. "Keep them," she said, "and I will make father sell you your liberty. Then you will get what Chavan is talking about. The idea took root in Christophe's brain. The work of stable boy was not strenuous, so Christophe had many hours of leisure. These he passed for the most part in Marie-Louise's company. She read to him, mostly books of history, to which he listened eagerly. She was reading about the English colonies one day when he interrupted her as a sudden thought took possession of him. He was from an English colony. All English people had at least two names. He had been named Christophe by a French captain, but he was going to have an English given name to go with it. Henri was the name he picked out. But the French people have Henri, interrupted Marie-Louise. Yes, but did you not tell me they spell the name differently? Inquired Christophe. Yes, with an I instead of a Y, admitted the girl. Then mine shall be spelled with a Y, declared Christophe. Then if that be your desire, it shall be Henri, and I will be the first to so address you. And she held out her hand. Henri grasped it and looked into her clear eyes for a moment, then drew her into his arms and kissed her. You are darling, he whispered. The cycle of childhood friendship ceased at that moment, and the commune of lovers begun. Very shortly, Christophe was taken from the stable and put into the billiard room to keep the score of the planters. It was a better place. The tips were more numerous and larger. The stanchy overalls of the stable boy were exchanged for a white starched coat and shirt. You look much nicer, commented Marie-Louise. Thank you, returned Christophe. I feel nicer, and I am grateful to you for the advancement, for I suppose it was your influence that obtained it for me. Father ought to be willing to do something for his daughter, was the only comment of Marie-Louise. The change was an education to Christophe, and the role of teacher changed from Marie-Louise to the first. The planters talked over their billiard and their wine, and the longer they played, the more they drank, the more they talked. They said things not intended for slave heirs. The wine loosened their tongue and blurred their intellect. Christophe listened with amazement and then coolly digested what they said, and within the short tropic twilight told what had been said with his disgust reflections to Marie-Louise. It was as new to her as to Christophe. First it amazed her, as it had her lover. Then she cogitated upon it. Then it was that Christophe became teacher. What he had heard the planter said was that Saint-Domingue was a powder barrel and liable to blow up at any time. There were, they said, 20,000 planters with 500,000 black slaves, and between them were 24,000 people, neither white or black, and the three classes were opposed to each other. If the slaves ever found out the power of numbers, it would be death to the whites. Also, if the jealousy of the mulattoes increased to the boiling point, so they could join the blacks, the boiling would become fiercer. But they were so jealous that they would not unite. Marie-Louise listened and thought as she listened to Christophe. There may be a revolution, she mused. A black kingdom may take the place of the white one. Chavan's dream may come true. It will mean bloodshed, interposed Christophe. Oh, I hope not, exclaimed the gentle Marie-Louise. Another thing the planters talked about, and that was the homeland of France. They were having a revolution across the sea, The king had been beheaded and a new order set up. The people had torn down the Bastille and declared all men were brothers. If the idea should ever cross the ocean to this province, then all would be doomed. France was rather of a misty, faraway land to Christophe and Marie-Louise, a wonderful land where they thought of the fine furniture which adorned the houses of the French planters and the flowing dresses which robed their wives and daughters. But the people, the common people, who had driven out the king, must be kind, even if savage, to be willing to clasp hands with all men as brothers. One night as the twilight deepened, and the two sat under the pepper tree in Cordova's courtyard, Christophe took a bag from his pocket and emptied the contents into Marie-Louise's lap. The heap was composed of shiny golden francs. There's what your father paid for me, with enough additional for annual interest. Do you think he would sell me my freedom? Marie-Louise gathered the golden heap into her hand, put it back into the bag, and returned it to Christophe. Keep it until I tell you to see father. The next day at nightfall, the two met under the pepper tree. She said, "You can see father now." The next night, at their meeting, Christophe said, "I have earned my first money as a free man today. Because of you, I suspect. And your father would not take any interest. Said my work ought to be interest enough. Also, I suppose, because of your influence. I don't know how I can thank you or repay you, but if a life of devotion will lessen my debt, I will gladly give it. I am poor, but I may be richer, and when I am, I'm coming to claim you." God damn! "Don't wait for riches," exclaimed Marie-Louise. "Time is flying, war is threatening, and we are sure only of the present." "You are a prize, Marie-Louise," throbbed Christophe. "I hope I deserve you." And in the closing twilight, their lips touched, and the betrothal kiss. Damn. Chapter 4. The effect of brotherhood of man. The revolutionary fire from France caught in the multiplying tinder of Saint-Domingue. Everybody wanted change, even the white planters, but the mulattoes thought their day had come when the National Assembly of Paris granted the right of election to all free men, irrespective of color. That set fire to the white fuel of the island, and the smoke from that fire floated about the billiard room of the Couronne. A white man had been dragged from his house and beheaded for agreeing with the yellow man. What? And a 70-year-old affranchi had been tied to the tail of a horse and dragged through the streets as an example. Mobs of white burned the plantation buildings of the yellows as a rebuke for insolence and riches. It was whites against France, yellows against white, and black against both. Orge, the mulatto, had been to France in the interest of the yellows, and he had his bones broken on the rack in the public square, together with those of Chavannes, the friend of Christophe. That was too much for the blacks, and they started an insurrection. Christophe kissed his wife and started for the mountain to join. The insurrection was not a success, and they saw the head of their leader paraded on the point of a pike through the street of Cap François as a warning. As a result, Toussaint, his runaway slave, crossed over the boundaries of the Spanish end of the island, from whence they fought the French end. But Toussaint could not be a Spaniard. His sympathies lay with France, who had declared all men free. So he again led French forces and became Governor General of Saint-Domingue, and reunited all the warring factions to the French flag, float over the whole island. But it had taken 7 years of savage war to do it. Christophe, who had been his lieutenant, had arisen to the rank and dignity of a general of France. Under the government of Toussaint, he was made a commandant of Cap François and surrounding country. He built a magnificent mansion in the city and furnished it with the most exquisite furniture that could be bought in Paris. Then he inducted Marie-Louise into it as his mistress. She walked through the rooms in awe. Oh, Henri, was all she could say. This is for the queen, your father said you should be. He replied. This is for the queen, your father said you should be, he replied. Your taste in reading and teaching is reflected here. Without it, I could not have produced it. You deserve all I can give. Enter and share my joy.